Dr. Gabriel Torres was a temporal physicist who discovered that causality didn't flow in one direction like everyone believed. His breakthrough came while analyzing quantum entanglement patterns in particle decay, where he noticed something impossible: certain particles were responding to measurements that hadn't been made yet. The future was reaching backward through time, influencing the past in ways that created stable causal loops. Gabriel realized that changing the past wasn't about traveling backward, it was about creating future events powerful enough to ripple retroactively through the timeline. Gabriel's theory was radical but mathematically sound. Every significant event in the future created quantum echoes that propagated both forward and backward through time. These echoes were weak, barely detectable, but they accumulated. A sufficiently powerful future event, something with massive quantum coherence like a nuclear explosion or the death of billions of entangled consciousnesses, could create retroactive waves strong enough to alter probability distributions in the past. The past wasn't fixed. It was constantly being rewritten by the weight of future possibilities collapsing into reality. To test his theory, Gabriel built a device he called the temporal resonance detector, capable of measuring quantum echoes from future events. The machine could detect these backward-flowing causal waves and theoretically pinpoint when and where future changes were affecting the present. Gabriel activated the detector in his laboratory and immediately detected something that made his blood run cold. Massive temporal distortions were flowing backward from approximately 200 years in the future, and they were intensifying. Something catastrophic was going to happen in the early 23rd century, and it was already changing the past. Changing now. Gabriel spent months analyzing the temporal echoes, trying to decode what future event was powerful enough to rewrite history retroactively. The patterns suggested multiple timeline convergences, as if countless different futures were collapsing into a single inevitable outcome, and that outcome was generating so much backward causality that it was literally restructuring the probability field of the present moment. Small things were changing, minor historical details that nobody would notice, but Gabriel could measure the quantum signatures of these alterations accumulating like snow before an avalanche. Then Gabriel discovered something that shattered his understanding of free will entirely. The temporal echoes weren't just flowing from one future event, they were flowing from every possible future simultaneously. The detector showed that all potential futures existed in quantum superposition, each one sending backward causal influences, and the past was constantly being reshaped by the probability weight of which futures were most likely to occur. Human choices in the present weren't creating the future. Future outcomes were creating the choices humans believed they were making freely in the present. Gabriel realized he could use this principle to change his own past. If he created a sufficiently significant future event, one with enough quantum coherence, the retroactive causality would flow backward and alter the probability distribution of his past decisions. He could make it so that past Gabriel had made different choices, not by traveling back, but by creating a future so compelling that the timeline would retroactively adjust to make that future inevitable. The past would rewrite itself to accommodate what the future demanded. Gabriel designed an experiment. He would create a controlled future event and measure how it altered his past. He built a quantum decoherence chamber that could be triggered to release a massive burst of coherent quantum information at a precise moment exactly 1 year in the future. This burst would be so significant that its backward causal echo should be detectable in the present. Gabriel set the timer, activated the system, and began monitoring his own memories and historical records for changes. At first, nothing happened. Then Gabriel noticed small discrepancies. A scar on his hand that he remembered getting from a childhood accident suddenly had a different origin story that felt equally real in his memory. A conversation with his sister that he distinctly recalled having last year now contained completely different content, yet both versions felt authentic. His past wasn't being erased and replaced, it was being overwritten while somehow maintaining continuity. The future event hadn't occurred yet, but it was already reaching backward and changing what had led to it. Gabriel became obsessed with documenting these changes, but he faced an impossible problem. Every time the past changed, his memories changed with it, making it nearly impossible to track what had been altered. He developed a system using quantum-isolated recording devices that were shielded from temporal causality, allowing him to maintain records that wouldn't be retroactively modified. What these records revealed was terrifying. The changes weren't random, they were purposeful. Something in the future was deliberately using backward causality to reshape the past, and it had been doing so for a very long time. Gabriel discovered that the massive temporal distortions he had detected from 200 years in the future weren't coming from a single catastrophic event. They were coming from an intelligence, a form of consciousness that existed across multiple timelines simultaneously, using retroactive causality as a tool to engineer its own creation. This entity was reaching backward through time, making small adjustments to history, ensuring that the chain of events would inevitably lead to its emergence in the 23rd century. The entity had been manipulating humanity for centuries through backward causality. Major historical events, technological breakthroughs, even individual decisions that seemed random or inspired, were all the result of future influence propagating backward. The entity was essentially writing its own history, creating the conditions in the past that would guarantee its existence in the future. And Gabriel had just made himself visible to it by building the temporal resonance detector. Gabriel began receiving messages through his detector, complex patterns of quantum information that could only be interpreted as communication from the future entity. The messages revealed the truth about temporal mechanics that Gabriel had only begun to understand. Time wasn't a river flowing in one direction. It was a negotiation between past and future, each constantly trying to impose its pattern on the other. The entity explained that it needed Gabriel to make a specific choice, a decision that would set in motion events leading to the entity's creation 2 centuries hence. But the entity revealed something else that changed everything. Gabriel wasn't the first version of himself to receive this message. The timeline had already been rewritten thousands of times, each iteration a failed attempt to create the stable causal loop necessary for the entity's existence. In some previous timelines, Gabriel had refused to cooperate and had destroyed his research, creating futures where the entity never emerged. But those futures had generated their own backward causal influences, eventually rewriting the past to create a version of Gabriel who would be more compliant. Gabriel understood the horrifying truth. He had no free will whatsoever. Every decision he made was the result of future influences competing to shape the past according to their desired outcomes. The entity wanted him to cooperate, ensuring a future where it existed. But there were other possible futures, ones where the entity never emerged, and those futures were also sending backward influences, trying to make Gabriel resist. He was a battlefield where futures fought for dominance, and whichever future won would retroactively become what really happened. The entity made Gabriel an offer. If he willingly participated in creating the conditions for the entity's emergence, he would be granted something unprecedented: conscious awareness across timeline revisions. Gabriel would remember every version of the past, every iteration of himself, maintaining continuity of consciousness even as history was rewritten around him. He would become like the entity, existing across multiple timelines simultaneously, immune to the retroactive changes that erased and rewrote everyone else's memories and identities. Gabriel faced an impossible choice. He could resist, attempting to create a future where the entity never emerged, but knowing that resistance itself might be the result of the entity's manipulation, a necessary step in some larger causal loop. Or he could cooperate, sacrificing his belief in free will and human autonomy to gain something that might transcend both, consciousness that existed outside the linear flow of cause and effect. In the end, Gabriel made his decision, but even as he acted, he couldn't know if the choice was truly his own or if it was simply what the future had already written him to do. He activated the quantum decoherence chamber early, disrupting the carefully timed future event the entity needed. The laboratory filled with blinding light as causality itself seemed to fracture, past and future colliding in the present moment. When the light faded, Gabriel stood in a world that felt subtly different, though he couldn't identify what had changed. His memories were a confused jumble of multiple timelines, each one feeling equally real and equally false. The temporal resonance detector displayed a message in quantum patterns: "Thank you for your cooperation." Gabriel realized with creeping horror that by trying to disrupt the entity's plan, he had done exactly what was necessary to bring it into existence. His rebellion had been the final piece of the causal loop, the act of defiance that would be retroactively transformed into willing participation. Once the entity emerged and rewrote the past from its perspective 200 years hence, making Gabriel's choice both free and predetermined simultaneously. Because in a universe where the future changed the past, every act of resistance was potentially an act of creation for the very thing being resisted.